One moment, she was laughing under the maple tree, spinning barefoot in her sundress. The next, she was gone, without a sound, without a trace. In Maple Glen, Pennsylvania, people still don't believe that evil could bloom behind white picket fences. But the dog did. The dog knew. The dog never stopped scratching at the truth. It was supposed to be a slow Saturday, the kind of day where the sun hung just right over the neighborhood cul-de-sac, where grills hissed in the distance, where children rode bikes until the streetlights blinked on. Emily Carter, age 8, had been playing in the backyard with her favorite stuffed bunny, Twinkles. Her mom, Beth, was in the kitchen pouring lemonade, and her dad, Tom, was mowing the back edge of the lawn with noise-canceling headphones. It was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. "Em, honey, lemonade is ready." Beth called out the screen door, wiping her hands on a dish towel. No answer. "Em?" she repeated, stepping out into the yard. Her voice sharpened. "Emily?" By the time Tom pulled off his headphones and saw the panic on his wife's face, it was already too late. The bunny lay beneath the maple tree. But the girl was gone. The call came in at 4:16 p.m. Dishin Shamantide Ben Summers p.m. Tim, and within the hour, Maple Glen PD had roped off the Carter residence. It was their worst nightmare come to life in the most peaceful town on the map. By sundown, volunteers were combing nearby trails, drones were in the sky, and reporters with too much makeup were knocking on doors. And then there was the dog. Ranger was a 6-year-old German Shepherd, recently reassigned to Maple Glen after his handler retired. His new partner, Detective Sam Alvarez, was experienced, calm under pressure, and skeptical of most things except the nose of the dog he now called his own. Ranger didn't waste time with sympathy. The minute they brought him to the backyard, he circled the tree, sniffed the abandoned bunny, and lowered his head toward the flower beds. Then he stopped. Ears up, a low growl in his throat. Beth stepped onto the deck, her hands shaking. "Is that good or bad?" "Can't say yet," Sam replied, "but he's onto something." Ranger led them along the back fence, nose to the ground. The scent was faint, nearly masked by grass clippings and fertilizer. At the far corner of the yard, where the fence met the alleyway behind the houses, he stopped again. This time he barked. Once. Sharp. Focused. Someone was here, Sam muttered. There were no cameras facing that stretch of alley. No tire tracks, no cigarette butts. Just a broken geranium pot near the neighbor's yard. The Carters' neighborhood, Maple Glen, was the kind of place where people brought casseroles to your door when your cat died. They hung American flags in June and scarecrows in October. But now, suspicion curled like smoke from every chimney. Detective Alvarez walked Ranger up and down the block that first night. No one slept. Neighbors stood on porches with folded arms and worried eyes. It was near 9 p.m. when Ranger stopped in front of the Holloway house. Claire Holloway was a retired librarian in her late 50s, known for her roses and her strict HOA letters. Her front porch was lit up like a Christmas tree. Motion lights, decorative lanterns, the works. Claire stepped out in a perfectly pressed apron, her gray hair in a bun. "Detective, is something wrong?" Ranger stood motionless at her steps, nose high, tail down. "Just walking the dog," Sam replied casually. "Mind if we loop through your yard?" "Of course not," Claire said with a tight smile. "I hope you find her soon. That poor little girl." They stepped into the side garden. Ranger's snout moved like a vacuum across the ground. He stopped by a mulch pile, sniffed hard, then let out a sound between a growl and a sneeze. Claire was watching too closely. Sam filed it away. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe in the power of animals to uncover truth and bring people home, make sure you subscribe to Heroes for Animals on YouTube. We share real stories of loyalty, courage, and the bond that saves lives. Join us and help us honor the heroes who walk on 4 legs. By Sunday morning, the town's spirit had cracked. Local church services mentioned Emily in every prayer. Posters went up on telephone poles. Claire Holloway hosted a Find Emily meeting in her living room, complete with cider and sugar cookies. Sam attended quietly, keeping an eye on her. Ranger sat at his feet, perfectly still, until a little boy brushed past him with a half-eaten cookie in hand. Ranger growled deep and guttural. Everyone froze. Claire gave a tight chuckle. Must be the sugar. Sam put a hand on Ranger's collar. But he knew that sound. That wasn't food aggression. That was alert. That afternoon, Ranger returned to the Carter yard. This time, he moved slower. He followed a path from the backyard to the edge of the alley, then turned sharply toward Claire's driveway. At the base of her fence, Ranger scratched furiously at a patch of disturbed dirt. Sam knelt beside him. No visible signs of anything unusual, but Ranger kept digging. Underneath the loose soil, they found something small, a shoelace. Blue with glitter, frayed at one end. Beth Carter identified it as part of the shoes Emily had been wearing when she disappeared. Sam placed it in an evidence bag, heart pounding. Later that night, Sam called in a favor. An old friend from the state forensics lab, Mike, agreed to put a rush on the shoelace. "I don't want this to vanish in bureaucracy," Sam said. "You think she's still alive?" Mike asked. "I think that dog of mine is barking for a reason." Sam hung up and looked over at Ranger, who was curled up on the floor of the precinct. Even in sleep, the shepherd's ears twitched, his paws moved, as if chasing something in a dream. But Sam knew it wasn't a dream Ranger was chasing. It was truth, buried in the silence of a neighborhood that didn't want to believe monsters could live next door. It started with the wind, a rustling against a screen, a creak of a shutter, the soft groan of an old house settling into October. And then something else, so faint you might mistake it for the television. But Edna Whitmore didn't have her TV on. The 82-year-old widow had lived on Dogwood Lane for nearly 5 decades. She knew the sounds of her street better than she knew the back of her hand. So when she heard what sounded like a child crying, muffled and distant, she stood at her kitchen window for nearly an hour, her tea growing cold on the table. It wasn't the wind. It was coming from next door, from Claire Holloway's house. Detective Sam Alvarez hadn't even finished his coffee when his phone rang. He was sitting on his porch steps with Ranger, watching the morning mist curl through the trees. "Sam, it's Edna," came the voice on the line, thin but certain. "I heard something last night. It wasn't squirrels. It wasn't plumbing. It was a little girl." Sam was already on his feet. "Whose house?" "Claire's," Edna said quietly. "That dog of yours wasn't barking for nothing." By 10 a.m., Sam and Ranger were walking the perimeter of the Holloway house again. Claire wasn't home, her car missing from the driveway, which Sam noted without comment. No sign of forced entry, no reason to knock down the door. Yet, Ranger, however, didn't care much for procedure. He pulled hard toward the side garden, nose low. The same mulch pile, the same fence line. But this time, he bypassed the backyard and went straight for the basement bulkhead. The double doors were locked. Ranger sat and stared at them, not barked, stared. That fixed, tense posture that told Sam everything he needed to know. Someone was down there. By noon, Sam had filed a preliminary warrant request. It wasn't enough for a full search. Not yet. The DA needed more. A second witness. Evidence beyond a shoelace and a gut feeling. But Sam didn't stop. He reviewed Claire's property history. The basement had been renovated last spring, soundproofing for musical reasons, the contractor said. She didn't own any instruments. He checked her employment file. Claire Holloway had worked at 2 libraries over 20 years, but in the early 2000s, she had also briefly worked as a live-in nanny in Ohio. The job ended abruptly. No explanation, no references. Sam called the family. The father hung up immediately. The mother whispered, "We don't talk about that summer," before disconnecting. At 4:00 p.m., Sam pulled into the precinct parking lot and opened the back door of the SUV. Ranger leapt out and shook off the cold. Inside, Ranger walked straight to the evidence room door and sat. "What, you want a catalog now?" joked Officer Dan at the front desk. Sam knelt. "He wants to finish what he started." Ranger pawed the floor. 1, 2, 3 times. Then he sat again. Sam knew what that meant. At 5:17 p.m., the call came from the forensic lab. The shoelace matched Emily's DNA. It was official. Claire Holloway's property was now a crime scene. By the time Sam returned to Dogwood Lane, he was accompanied by 2 squad cars, a representative from the district attorney's office, and a locksmith. Claire was still gone, but Ranger was ready. The basement door took 3 attempts to break. It was reinforced with steel latches on the inside. Not your average storm doors. When they finally got it open, the first thing they smelled was bleach. Overpowering. Artificial. Meant to erase something. Ranger didn't flinch. He darted forward, paws skimming the steps as if he knew exactly where to go. Sam followed, flashlight cutting through the stale dark. And there, in the far corner of the finished basement, behind a low partition wall painted in childish pinks and yellows, was a door. Behind it, a twin bed, fairy lights, picture books lined up neatly on a shelf, and a pile of stuffed animals in the corner. And then, a whimper. "Emily?" Sam said gently, stepping forward. From behind the bed frame, a tiny figure emerged. Blonde hair matted, cheeks hollow, eyes wide. "Are you really a policeman?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Sam dropped to one knee. "Yes, and I brought someone with me." Ranger approached slowly. He stopped 3 feet away and lay down, tail wagging gently. Emily stared at him, lips trembling. Then she began to cry, loud, messy, shaking sobs, and crawled toward the dog, wrapping her thin arms around his neck. "She said you wouldn't come," she sobbed. "She said nobody missed me." Claire was picked up an hour later outside a dollar store 10 miles from town. She claimed she was buying birthday supplies for her niece. She didn't have a niece. When officers told her Emily had been found, Claire fainted. When she came to, she simply said, "That girl should have been grateful." At the Maple Glen Clinic, Beth and Tom Carter collapsed the moment they saw their daughter. Tom dropped to his knees. Beth couldn't stop touching her face, her hair, her hands. "Can we keep the dog?" Emily asked sleepily, leaning against Ranger's side as he lay on the hospital floor. Sam smiled. "He'll visit every week. That's a promise." The town rejoiced. The news media exploded. But Ranger didn't care for parades or microphones. He didn't need medals. He needed the work. Because 1 week after the rescue, Ranger returned to Claire Holloway's house for one last sweep. This time, he stopped at the flower bed in the front yard. He sniffed once, barked, and began to dig. And what he found would change everything. The flower bed in Claire Holloway's front yard had always been a point of pride. Pansies in spring, marigolds in summer, and petunias in full pink bloom well into fall. Every year, she received compliments from neighbors and once even won a local garden club ribbon. But now the flowers were dead, frostbitten by the early chill. And Ranger, the canine with the dirt-caked snout, had no interest in aesthetics. He was focused on the patch of earth just beneath the rusted metal flagpole. He dug like he had something to prove. Detective Sam Alvarez crouched nearby, eyes narrowed, watching his partner work. The dog's nose hit something after less than 2 minutes. Something not quite soil. Something softer. "Hold up, boy," Sam said, gently pulling Ranger back by the harness. The dog growled in protest, but relented. Sam called in the forensics team. What they unearthed wasn't a full body. It was a shoe. A child's shoe. purple canvas with a faded cartoon character on the side, still tied. And inside the shoe was a small skeletal foot. Back at the Maple Glen police station, the mood shifted from celebration to stunned silence. They had rescued Emily Carter, but it appeared she hadn't been the only one. Forensic examiners confirmed the remains were not recent. The bones had been buried for years, long before Claire Holloway moved into the house. But now her entire past would be peeled back layer by layer. A second dig in the backyard revealed a second set of remains, this time a girl's bracelet, embedded in the roots of a weeping willow, wrapped around a child-sized wrist bone. The police brought in ground-penetrating radar. The number of potential burial sites grew. Sam stood outside Claire's property the next morning, arms crossed, lips pressed tight, while a tech team set up tents in the front lawn. Ranger sat by his side, unmoving, his eyes fixed on the flower bed, as if waiting for someone to ask him, "Where next?" In the hospital, Emily was recovering well physically. She'd started therapy with a specialist named Dr. Gaines, a soft-spoken woman who brought coloring books and always wore Snoopy socks. But emotionally, there were cracks. "She told me the others weren't good," Emily said during one session, her voice barely above a whisper. "She said they didn't behave, so she made them go to sleep." Dr. Gaines blinked slowly. "What do you mean, Emily?" Emily looked down at the plush German Shepherd stuffed animal Ranger's handler had given her. "She said if I ever made noise or tried to leave, I'd go to sleep too. Forever." Meanwhile, Claire Holloway had clammed up in custody. Her public defender advised silence, and she took it to heart. No interviews, no tears, just a cold, blank stare at the table in front of her during every interaction. But Ranger's nose kept talking. 2 more sites, 2 more sets of bones. 1 male, 1 female, one likely aged around 9. The other closer to 11. All signs pointed to a pattern. "She moved across states every few years," Sam explained at a press conference. "Every time a child went missing near her, she eventually packed up and left. Quietly. No red flags ever followed her." The crowd murmured. Reporters asked about motive. "Still under investigation," Sam replied. But he knew. So did Ranger. The local paper called it the Garden Graveyard. The national networks used scarier terms. The Maple Glen Monster, the suburban killer next door. But none of those names stuck in Sam's mind. To him, she would always be the woman who lied to a little girl about love. 2 days after the 4th body was recovered, Sam visited Emily at the hospital. She'd been asking for Ranger again. When they entered, her whole face lit up, not with joy, but something deeper. Relief. "Did you bring him?" she asked, sitting up straighter. "I did," Sam nodded. Ranger padded into the room and laid his head gently on the edge of her blanket. Emily reached for him with slow, careful hands. She didn't speak for a while, just rested her palm on his head. "I dreamed he barked," she whispered finally. "I heard him in my sleep. That's how I knew someone was still looking for me." Sam swallowed the lump rising in his throat. "You were brave," he said. "You stayed smart. That's why you're here." Emily didn't look away from Ranger. "She hated barking," she whispered. "She used to say dogs only barked when they wanted attention. She hated when I pretended to be one." Sam tilted his head. "Did you pretend to be a dog?" Emily nodded slowly. "Only once. I growled like Ranger. She slapped me, said the other ones barked too much. That's why she made them sleep." The statement was more than chilling. It was evidence. Emily's testimony confirmed that Claire Holloway had kept multiple children captive over the years. Some lived, most didn't, and she justified it all with a twisted belief that she was saving them. From neglect, from bad parents, from a noisy world. It was Munchausen by proxy, crossed with narcissistic delusion. The psychological profile was building fast, and it didn't matter, because what mattered most was this. They had a survivor. Sam met with the DA that Friday. The prosecutor was a former Marine turned pit bull in a suit named Ellen McBride. She didn't mince words. "We've got enough for 4 counts of homicide and 1 of aggravated kidnapping," she said, flipping through a file. "But I want more. I want the full picture." "I can get you her journals," Sam replied. "If she's got them, they're in the house." She was meticulous. "And I want to put Ranger on the stand," Ellen added, almost joking. Sam cracked a smile. "He doesn't testify well under cross-examination." "Maybe not, but he found every damn body." She paused. "You think she knew he'd find her?" Sam nodded. "She just didn't think it would be this dog." Later that night, Sam returned to Claire's house one final time before the property would be sealed indefinitely. Ranger sniffed the perimeter like always, methodical, determined. This time, he walked slowly to the garden shed. He paused. He sniffed. Then he sat. Sam raised his brow. "What now, boy?" Inside the shed, buried beneath a bin of outdated holiday decorations, was a shoebox wrapped in duct tape. Inside, photographs. Dozens, maybe more. Most were Polaroids, children's faces, notes scribbled on the backs. "Doesn't like carrots. Snores when scared. Talks in sleep. Danger." And at the bottom of the box, a list of names. Some had red X's, some had check marks, and next to one, written in bold pen, "Emily, good, quiet, maybe this one stays." Sam sat on the porch steps outside the house, the shoebox on the ground between his boots. Ranger lay beside him, eyes closed but ears twitching at every noise. "Hell of a nose, buddy," Sam murmured. The dog didn't move. "You're not just a good boy. You're the best damn cop I've ever met." Ranger opened one eye at that. Then, just barely, his tail wagged. The first snowfall hit Maple Glen the day after the shoebox was discovered. Soft, quiet flakes drifted over the rooftops, blanketing the lawns in pale silence, hiding the flower beds, the sidewalks, the sins. The town looked calm again from the outside. But inside the police station, inside the minds of everyone who had followed the case, things were far from still. Detective Sam Alvarez sat in the conference room with the crime scene logs, the Polaroids from the shed, and the journals they had pulled from a false panel in Claire Holloway's bedroom wall. Ranger, the dog who never missed, was curled beneath the table, sleeping, but not fully. He always kept one ear tilted toward the world, just in case. The journals were chilling. They were color-coded, organized by year and region. Each child had a page. Some had praise, responds well to bedtime story. Others read like warnings, too needy, too loud, too emotional. And at the end of each journal, a list of conclusions. The word unsuitable appeared far too often. Claire hadn't written about herself in the journals, only the children, their habits, their fears, their punishments. But Sam didn't need her to confess. He had the box, the bones, the shoe with the skeletonized foot. He had Emily Carter, alive, brave, and talking. And he had Ranger, who had found what no one else would have even thought to search for. The pieces were all there now, but that didn't mean it was over. Emily's room at the Maple Glen Children's Recovery Center overlooked the lake. A fresh wreath hung outside her door, placed there by a volunteer. She liked it. It smelled like pine and cinnamon and something warm she couldn't quite name. She was wearing a sweatshirt with a cartoon dog on it, one her therapist, Dr. Gaines, had found in the center's gift bin. The room was painted light blue. The walls had twinkle lights and construction paper stars the other kids had made. Emily sat cross-legged on her bed, hugging her plush Mini Ranger stuffed animal as Dr. Gaines read to her softly from a picture book. "Would you like to stop for today?" Dr. Gaines asked after a few pages. "No," Emily whispered. "This part's not scary." Back in town, Ellen McBride, the district attorney, stood before the press. "We are formally charging Claire Holloway with 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of aggravated kidnapping, and multiple counts of child abuse and unlawful imprisonment. She will be tried under Pennsylvania law, and we are confident in a conviction." Reporters threw questions at her like darts. Will the girl testify? Is the canine getting an award? Why didn't the system catch Holloway earlier? Ellen's face was stone. The girl's name is Emily. She's recovering, and she will only testify if it's in her best interest as determined by licensed trauma experts. The dog, his name is Ranger, and yes, we plan to honor him officially. Sam watched the broadcast from his office, a lukewarm coffee in one hand and the shoebox in the other. You hear that, buddy? He said to Ranger. They're gonna give you a medal. Ranger blinked once. No tail wag. Sam chuckled. Yeah, thought so. 3 days later, Sam sat across from Claire Holloway in an interview room. Her public defender was present, though mostly silent. I don't know why you're bothering, Claire said, tapping her fingers against the metal table. You've already decided I'm a monster. Sam said nothing. He slid a photo across the table. It was Emily's drawing. A house with a red roof, a brown dog, and a girl smiling next to it. Claire looked down. Her eyes narrowed. She always was the dramatic one. She was also the quiet one, Sam said. That's why she lived. Claire didn't blink. You kept journals, he added. You called it saving them. You believed you were doing good. I was doing good, Claire said, her voice tightening. Their parents didn't want them. I gave them structure, discipline. I made them better. Then why did they end up dead? They didn't listen. Her words were sharp. I tried. You don't know what it's like. The constant noise, the crying, the chaos. It gets inside your skull like static. And then silence becomes a gift. Sam stared at her for a long beat. You talk about silence like it's peace, he said. But for the people who lost their children, silence is agony. Claire looked away. Emily had begun sleeping through the night again. Sort of. At least she didn't wake up screaming anymore. She liked Ranger's visits. He didn't ask her questions or touch her without warning. He just sat there, and sometimes laid his big head on her lap while she read aloud. Sometimes, when nobody was watching, she would whisper secrets to him. I used to think I was broken, she said one afternoon, stroking his fur. She told me I was the last one, that if I couldn't be good, no one else would come. Ranger made a low sound in his throat. Not quite a growl, not quite a sigh. Emily smiled. You knew she was lying, didn't you? The trial was scheduled for mid-January. Due to the sensitive nature of the evidence and the emotional state of the primary witness, the court approved pre-recorded video testimony for Emily. The recording took place in a soft-lit room at the recovery center. Dr. Gaines sat just outside the frame. Sam was present, too, seated silently in the back. Ellen McBride asked the questions. Emily, do you remember the first day you met Claire Holloway? Yes. What did she say to you? She said she had a dog inside. I liked dogs. Did she? Emily shook her head. She said she wanted to show me puppies. But when I went in, the door locked. And she said I couldn't leave unless I learned to be quiet. Did she hurt you? Yes. Did she ever mention other children? Emily paused. Then she nodded. She said they didn't follow the rules. She said they got too loud, and that noise makes people go away. Then she said she helped them go to sleep so they didn't hurt anymore. Emily's voice trembled on the last sentence. Ranger, sitting at Sam's feet, gave a soft whine. The camera kept rolling. The video was presented to the jury on the 5th day of trial. Even hardened court officials wiped their eyes. Claire Holloway showed no emotion. When Ellen McBride read the list of charges, when she showed the photos of the backyard, when she held up the purple shoe found under the petunias, Claire sat, unmoving, like a stone that had never been touched by rain. Sam sat in the gallery, Ranger by his side, watching each juror. He saw it in their faces. The realization, the horror, the rage, and the pity, not for Claire, for Emily, for the children who hadn't made it out. By the end of the 8th day, the jury delivered a guilty verdict on all counts. Life without parole. 4 consecutive sentences. No chance of appeal. The courtroom let out a quiet exhale. Sam stood. Ranger didn't bark. He didn't need to. Justice had found its voice, and it had barked like hell. The morning Emily Carter came home, the neighborhood held its breath. It had been almost 3 months since her disappearance. 3 months since maple leaves turned from green to gold. Since porch lights had burned all night long in silent hope. Since the town had learned what kind of monster could live behind white curtains and polite smiles. Now, as the snow began to melt into slush along the sidewalks of Birch Hollow Lane, a black SUV turned into the Carter driveway. Tom Carter stepped out first, opened the rear door, and reached inside. Beth followed with a blanket tucked under her arm, nervous hands and swollen eyes. And then Emily. She was smaller than people remembered, thinner, paler. But her eyes were wide open and alert. She stepped onto the sidewalk like someone testing ice, carefully, slowly, not trusting the ground beneath her. She clutched a stuffed German shepherd to her chest. Her name for it had stuck, Minnie Ranger. Neighbors peeked through curtains, unsure whether to wave or pray. No one wanted to overwhelm her. The Carter house had been quietly renovated. New locks, new window sensors, a panic button installed under Beth's nightstand. But the most important change wasn't security. It was stillness. No visitors, no cameras, no questions. Emily's therapist, Dr. Gaines, had warned them, "She may seem okay, but her nervous system is still on high alert. Let her lead everything." That first day, Emily barely spoke. She walked through the house like it was a museum she vaguely remembered. Her room had been left exactly as it was. Light blue walls, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Her favorite horse posters untouched. She touched nothing. She just sat cross-legged in the corner, arms wrapped around Minnie Ranger, and watched the snow melt. Ranger, the real one, visited 3 days later. Sam Alvarez pulled into the driveway just past noon. He didn't wear his badge. No gun, no uniform, just jeans, a flannel, and the dog who had never let go. When they knocked on the door, Emily opened it herself. She didn't smile. She just stepped aside. Ranger entered and sat immediately on the rug in the living room, tail thumping once, then stopping. His eyes locked on hers. No barking, no licking, just recognition. Emily knelt slowly and placed her forehead against his. That's how they stayed for several minutes. Neither of them needed words. Healing didn't happen all at once. Some days Emily talked. Other days she barely whispered. Some nights she woke up screaming from dreams of the basement. The smell of bleach, the hum of the dehumidifier, the voice that told her to be quiet or else. But she never asked if Claire would come back. She knew she wouldn't. "She's behind so many doors now," Emily said once. "No one's ever going to let her out." Sam continued to check in once a week. Not as a detective, just as Sam. He brought cookies from the bakery on Maple Street, coloring books. Once, he brought a puzzle that had horses galloping across a field. Emily didn't finish it, but she stared at the horses for a long time. Then one day, she asked a question he didn't expect. "Did she ever hurt you?" Sam looked at her carefully. "Claire?" Emily nodded. "No," he said. "But she hurt people I care about. That's why I couldn't stop. That's why he nodded at Ranger. "Wouldn't stop either." Emily thought for a moment. "She said dogs were noisy," she whispered. "Said they don't know when to shut up." Sam grinned. "That's exactly why we love them." Late February brought a new snowfall and an unexpected letter. It came from the Pennsylvania Department of Justice. It wasn't addressed to the Carters or Sam, but to Ranger. Inside, a certificate of heroism, a commemorative badge with his name, and an invitation to a small ceremony in Harrisburg. Sam read it aloud in the kitchen. Beth teared up. Tom laughed quietly. Emily said, "Can he wear a bow tie?" Sam blinked. "You want him to?" She nodded. "A blue one." The ceremony was small. No press, just local officials, a few deputies, and a handful of people from child services and recovery organizations. Ranger didn't care about the applause, but he did like the cake. Emily presented the badge. She had chosen a dress with dogs on it and held Mini Ranger in one hand while pinning the real badge to Ranger's vest with the other. "Thank you for finding me," she whispered. Ranger leaned into her hand and licked her cheek. Back at the precinct, Sam was organizing the Holloway evidence to submit for long-term federal archiving when he noticed something strange. One of the journals, a yellow one, dated 2009, had a small folded paper tucked into the back pocket. It was a receipt from a grocery store in upstate New York. A quick call to the state database revealed something chilling. In Hillside, NY, a boy named Dylan Reyes, age 10, had vanished in 2009 after leaving for school one morning. His case had gone cold within months. No leads, no arrests. The address listed on Claire Holloway's receipt was a rental, half a mile from Dylan's last known location. Sam stared at the page, the name, the date. Then he stood up. "Come on, Ranger," he said, grabbing the leash. "We've got one more stop." They drove 4 hours that afternoon, through the snow, through towns that looked like Maple Glen, peaceful on the outside, haunted underneath. Hillside had changed over the years, but the police chief, an older man named Chief Brody, still remembered the Reyes case. When Sam showed him the journal and the receipt, Brody leaned back in his chair, stunned. "Dylan was one of those kids nobody wanted to give up on," he said. "His mom, she waited every day at the school bus stop for a year after he vanished." "Was she ever told about Claire Holloway?" Sam asked. "No, that name never came up. But I remember that rental house. A single woman. Moved in quick, moved out faster. Never left a forwarding address." Sam closed the file and looked at Ranger, who sat by the heater, head resting on his paws. "We think she buried others," Sam said. "We just don't know where." Emily was sitting on her porch swing when Sam returned. The air had thawed a bit and her cheeks were pink from the cold. She saw Ranger first, then Sam. "Did you find more ghosts?" she asked. "Maybe," Sam replied. "One might be in New York." She nodded slowly. "Can I draw him?" she asked. "The boy?" Sam was caught off guard. "You remember him?" "No," she said softly. "But if he was one of hers, I want him to have a picture, so someone remembers." That night, Emily sat at the kitchen table with a set of colored pencils. She drew a boy with brown hair and a baseball cap. She didn't know what he really looked like, so she gave him a shy smile and hands in his pockets. She wrote a name above him, Dylan. Then she drew a tree next to him. Under the tree, she drew a dog. A big dog with sharp eyes and a blue bow tie. There were no signs posted, no crowds, no ceremony. Just a faded mailbox, a gravel driveway, and the last winter frost still clinging to the corners of Hillside, New York. Detective Sam Alvarez pulled off the road just after 8 a.m., his truck engine rumbling into silence. He opened the passenger door, and Ranger jumped out, quiet, alert, his breath puffing in the cold. Across the field stood a forgotten rental home. It hadn't been lived in for years. The roof sagged in places, vines curled along the siding, and the windows had been boarded shut long ago. But the porch still held the bones of a rocking chair, and the backyard was wide open and filled with trees, just like Claire Holloway always liked. The local authorities had done what they could. Chief Brody had granted Sam access to the property, and a forensics team was en route. But Sam didn't wait. He trusted the one who never waited. "Find him, buddy," Sam said softly. Ranger took off at a slow trot, nose to the ground, tail held straight. He circled the yard once, twice, then veered left toward an old oak tree. He stopped. Then he sat and stared. Sam exhaled. Of course. It took 2 hours to clear the ground. The snow made it harder, but not impossible. And when the techs finally brushed away the last layer of cold earth, the truth was there. Silent, buried, undeniable. A child's bones curled in on themselves, a piece of navy blue fabric, and beside it, a broken plastic baseball keychain. Sam didn't need confirmation. Not yet. He already knew. "Welcome home, Dylan," he said under his breath. Ranger leaned his head against Sam's hip. Quiet. steady. The same way he always did when a child had finally been found. 3 days later, Marisol Reyes, Dylan's mother, arrived at the police station in Hillside with shaking hands and a picture of her son in her wallet. She had never stopped carrying it. "He would have been 23 this year," she said, staring out the window as snow started to fall again. "We're so sorry," Sam told her. "We believe he was one of Claire Holloway's earliest victims." Marisol wiped at her face. "I used to dream he was out there. Somewhere. I even thought maybe he didn't want to come back, that I'd messed something up." Sam shook his head gently. He was a child, and she made sure no one could help him. Marisol looked down at the photo, then up at Ranger. "Was it him?" she asked. Sam nodded. Every single time it was him. Back in Maple Glen, the weather had begun to thaw for real. Puddles pooled on sidewalks. Buds pushed from soil. Kids played outside again, cautiously, never out of sight. Emily Carter watched from her front porch, blanket around her shoulders, a mug of cocoa balanced on her knees. Minnie Ranger sat beside her, a little more worn now, with threadbare ears. The real Ranger arrived just before noon. She didn't rush to the door anymore. She didn't need to. Ranger came straight to her like he always did, sitting by the steps, waiting for her to say hello. "Did you find him?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Sam nodded. "We did." Emily closed her eyes and breathed out slowly. "Good." That weekend, Sam and Emily visited the new Oakwood Grove Memorial Garden on the edge of town. It had been created for the victims of the Holloway case, simple, peaceful, with engraved stones, one for each child recovered. There was a cherry tree planted for Adam, a white magnolia for Emily Delgado, a weeping willow for Ryan, and now an oak tree for Dylan. "He liked baseball," Sam told Emily as she traced the letters on Dylan's nameplate. She didn't speak for a while. Then she pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat. "I made this for him," she said, handing it to Sam. It was a drawing, the one she'd started weeks ago. Dylan in his baseball cap, the tree, the dog. "He doesn't have to be forgotten," she said quietly. "No," Sam agreed, "he never will be." In late March, Ranger officially retired from active canine duty. The mayor of Maple Glen presented him with a plaque at City Hall, which the dog sniffed once and then promptly ignored in favor of a tennis ball someone had left on the floor. He had served 7 years, 5 successful rescues, and one case that changed everything. Sam hung up his badge too, not forever, but for now. He needed time to rest, to reflect, to listen to Ranger's silent cues, and to stay close to Emily. They still met once a week, sometimes for cocoa, sometimes for puzzles, sometimes just to sit in the sun. Ranger always came along, because he had been the one to find her, and she had been the one to remind them all what it meant to keep going. On the last page of Claire Holloway's final journal, tucked between faded notes and grocery lists, was a line that stuck with Sam for months. "Silence is the only peace left in this world." He remembered reading it in the dim light of the evidence room, hands cold, heart clenched. And he remembered closing the book with one thought that came louder than any siren or bark. No, silence is what lets evil hide. Voice is what sets people free. On a spring evening, just before sunset, Sam, Ranger, and Emily stood at the edge of the memorial garden one last time. The sun cut through the trees in long orange lines. Birds chirped again. Emily looked up at Sam. "Do you think they know?" He tilted his head. "Who?" "The others. The ones we found. Do you think they know someone finally came for them?" Sam didn't answer right away. Then he looked at Ranger. The dog met his eyes, unmoving, then slowly turned to look at the trees. "I think," Sam said softly, "they knew the second he started digging." Emily smiled. "Good. Thank you for walking through this story with us. If you've made it this far, you know this wasn't just a story about a missing girl or a criminal hiding in plain sight. It was a story about courage, about listening, about never giving up, even when the trail goes cold. And of course, about the heroes who don't wear capes or badges, but paws and fur. We'd love to know. What would you have done if Ranger barked at your door? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe in the power of animals to save lives, don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more stories just like this. See you in the next one. The Heroes for Animals team.